Focus. This is what happens when you use a T5i and everybody else is on ADDs. Bad autofocus. So, first things first, I've moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is far away. And that's part of why I haven't made any videos in a long time. It's not the only reason. It's just one of them. So this time, on my Webzone, we're going to talk about heavy metal vocal production techniques and just some of the things you can do with that to make vocals sound nice. So sit back, grab your testes, and welcome to my Webzone. Right, I wrote and recorded like a 1-minute song that was the idea behind it was to have a couple of different vocal styles and a couple different contexts for the vocals to sit in. By that I mean, are the drums going fast? Are the drums going slow? Is there lots of space in the mix? Is there not a lot of space in the mix? Switching it up a little bit with a couple different vocal styles to kind of talk about what you can do. Oh God, my goodness. No, we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do in different, with different vocal styles and different musical contexts from a production standpoint to just make sure everything kind of fits good, sounds good, is nice. Well, here's the song. And so we can kind of dive into it. I think I might switch over to pointing the camera at the computer because I don't have a good way of recording what I'm doing on my screen. Alright, so hopefully this works. Never tried this before. So, quick note, we got guitars, quad tracked. Echo, it's kind of like we talked about before. Here's the bass. I think I need to do a video about bass sounds, but see, there's a couple edits in here where I had to punch a few things in. Did this whole thing this afternoon, cut me a break. Barely learned how to play it before I had to record it. Drums, easy drummer. That's for the rest of the song, so we're going to talk about the vocals. So these are they. So here's the first part isolated. Why must we forget? So there's a couple things going on here. First, as you can see, I actually clipped these in the recording, which is my fault, and that's poor recording technique. There are two reasons I didn't fix it. First was I was lazy. I did the vocals in one take, and that makes it easier to video. Two, didn't sound too bad. So three, kind of lets me show you how I would fix something like that. So let me turn off for a second the time effects. So here is what that sounded like straight out of the microphone. So you can hear it breaks up and clips and doesn't sound great. So what I did to fix that ish was a series of compressors. First one is just like a limiter, basically. I've got infinite ratio, hard knee, zero attack, very fast release. And it's set so that it doesn't kick in until like it's super loud. Because I don't want to squash the rest of the vocal track there. It's the first thing the vocal's hitting. I just want to chop that high edge off. So that fixes that reasonably well. So then the second compressor is more of a normal vocal compressor. So the first one I was using the Reaper, built into Reaper, because I like how kind of clear all the controls are. And it's very transparent. It just does the thing it needs to do. The second compressor I used is the Waves H-Comp, which I like because it's got a little character to it if you want it to. The analog over here, I usually either have it off if I want it to be clean, or I'll set it over to 3, because 3 kind of thickens up the low end a little bit, which I like usually for vocals. Not all the time, but it's nice to have. And it's set fairly aggressively. Not a super high ratio, about 4:1, but then like, you know, decent gain boost. It's a little bit of a wet dry thing going on, which is cool that you can do that. And then threshold is fairly aggressive. And so what that's doing is just kind of leveling out the whole thing. That's what a compressor does. So that's normal. So without the so first compressor, not second compressor. You get and then kick in the second compressor. You get a little more beef on the vocal. If you go over to where there's actually like a line and words and stuff, so without the H-Comp, you get "Why must we forget?" with "Why must we forget?" So you can tell it's more consistent, it's a little more aggro sounding, and that's kind of the point. Then the last thing is just a little bit of EQ. I could have done it on the microphone, and I didn't, because sometimes I'm not sure how much low end I'm going to want for like the death growl stuff. And two, just to kind of show that even if you can't do cool stuff on the mic, you can do it in the console. It's nice to do it on the mic because you don't have to do it in the console. But basically, got a high pass filter about 100 hertz, just sort of rolls off low end so you don't build up at the low end. And then I'm rolling off a little bit in the top, the very top, just to kind of keep the harshness out. You could hear the compressor kind of added a little harshness, and that's more, I think more because I had the vocal a little too hot, but get that, so I'm just kind of rolling that off. And then these two little boosts here are just areas that I thought added to the body of the sound. So then again, so here's that line, no EQ. Why must we forget? And then with the EQ. Why must we forget? It's not a huge difference. It's pretty subtle. So then if you throw it back into the mix, so here it is dry. Why must we forget? And then with the effects. Why must we forget? There's that. I did forget to mention a thing I'm doing, and I always do this. So I've got the guitars bussed together, and I've got a little bit of EQ on the guitar. All that's doing is just dumping some of the low end so it doesn't build up. Nothing fancy there, barely hear it. And the other thing I'm doing is ducking the guitars with a side-chained compressor, and that's triggered off the vocal. So, a million tutorials on how to do this, but the short version is you have a compressor, and you set it up however you want. I have it set up so it just takes about a dB off routing here. I'm sending the vocals to channels 3 and 4 on the guitar bus, and then so for the detector for the compressor, instead of being the signal running through the compressor, it's detecting the vocals. So if you watch, it's only kicking in when the vocal is, and that just it's a trick that everyone uses that just kind of helps vocals pop, because vocals and guitars kind of occupy a lot of the same frequency space. If you have the guitar quiet enough where the vocal is always on top and the vocal goes away, the guitar feels too quiet. When you have the guitar loud enough to feel good, it usually buries the vocal a little bit, because like I said, they like live and write in the same spot. So this is a good way to kind of have your cake and eat it too. You get punchy vocals when you want them, but you also have punchy guitars when you don't want the vocal. So there's that. So now let's talk about effects a little bit. So I'll try this out so you can hear it better. I've got reverb and delay. My reverb is H reverb. This is going to end up looking like a Waves ad. It's really not. If Waves wants to give me money, that'd be cool. But I just got this reverb and I like it. And it's just there. It's a convolution reverb. It kind of sounds like whatever you want. I've also got the Abbey Road's plate reverb, which I like more for some kinds of vocals, and I like for guitars, sometimes drums, sometimes not. Depends on the drum. And then I've got an EQ, which again is just dumping some of the low end. I do that on almost everything because the biggest sign of an amateur mix is like a ton of low end buildup and nothing on top. And so just one of the things you do is on anything unless you really want it to exist in the sub low, you just cut out the low. Like I usually cut around 100 hertz. It depends, but about there. Works pretty well. So let's check out how this reverb sounds. Why must we forget? So that's a lot of reverb. I like a lot of reverb. I think reverb sounds fucking awesome, you know? I think if you have too much, like if I crank this all the way up, why must we forget? Yeah, it would sound stupid. Why must we forget? You can't hear the vocal anymore. But why must we forget? That just gives it some space, makes it sound cooler, which is what you really care about. And then I also like delay a lot, and I usually run a delay and a reverb at the same time. Not everyone likes that. I do. A lot of times I'll run an EQ on the delay, but again, using the Waves delay already has a high pass filter on it, so that that's a nice feature because it kind of saves you from having to stack a second plugin on top. And so the delay sounds like, why must we forget? It's a stereo delay, as you can very clearly tell. Fair amount of feedback, but a fairly short repeat time. And I actually usually like longer repeat times, but I really like the way it treated the scream. Just kind of makes it sound like big and mean. And then the compressor is, remember the thing I was talking about with the guitars? It's kind of doing the same thing, but for the delay. So instead of, it's kind of funny because you're feeding the signal back on itself, sort of. So you've got the routing here is vocal is going to the delay, and it's going through the delay, and then the delay is going into the compressor. And the detector for the compressor, instead of being the delay signal, is the vocal signal right out of the track. So it's the same signal that's feeding the delay, but the delay is all the way wet. So you don't get any of that initial signal in it. You use that initial signal to trigger the compressor. And what that does is it buries the delay until they're done singing, and then it pops up again. That's really common, really useful. You can do it on reverb too. I don't usually, because I often just like the reverb to be there, because I've already got a delay. That is kind of what gives it the space at the end of the phrase, but you can do it on reverb too, and it works real well. So that is the delay there, and so that's that section of voice. So when you put it together, and then in the mix, so I like having the two different time-based effects because it just makes everything sound big and cool, and metal's supposed to sound big and cool, so that's where I'm at with that. There's nothing else really fancy going on here. The weirdest thing was fixing the clipping. So then we go over to the next vocal part, which is the growl part, and as you can see visually very easily, this is a lot quieter, to the point where, again, I really should have just done it in different takes. And that's a good rule of thumb, is anytime you're switching voice, pull up a second track. You know, it's a digital audio workstation. You can have unlimited tracks. That way you can record it at a nice, good level, and you don't have to add a ton of gain. So one thing I did have to do was actually add a fair amount of gain. So if you had an EQ on it, so here's this track straight out of the microphone.
No, trading compassion, boy.
So what's going on there? I've got an EQ, which is, again, dumping a little bit of the low end, so there's no build up, kind of scooping out somewhere around 3K to just sort of mellow it out a little, and then boosting kind of the low mids some, because I thought it sounded a little better. So no EQ.
No.
EQ.
No.
And then you'll notice it's louder because I added about a dB of gain on the EQ to feed the compressor, which set very similarly actually to the other compressor. The threshold's a little higher because the whole track's a little lower. I'm just trying to squeeze it up, kind of match. The ratio is a little higher. It's like 5 and a bit instead of not quite 4. Using setting 3 to get a little more beef to it. So no compressor.
No.
Yes compressor.
No.
So same kind of thing. It's adding a little aggression to it because of the way this compressor is colored. Adding a little more gain over here, you can see. So when you come over to a phrase,
Trading compassion, boy. Trading compassion, boy.
the biggest difference is really in volume. Fortunate, I like the way my voice sounds, and I like the way it sounds through that microphone, so I usually don't really have to treat it too much. So that's my little flex there. We'll go over to the reverb. Similar, but not the same reverb. A little darker, I think.
Trading compassion, boy.
It just kind of has like it's a little darker and it feels longer, even though I think technically the other one is longer, but whatever. A little bit different in the way like the build up works. I don't really know what all these parameters really mean, to be perfectly honest. I kind of messed with them until they sounded good and kind of bounced between like presets and screwing with them. And then this EQ again is just to dump the low end on the reverb, especially with the growl. There's a lot of low end anyway. So like here's the verb with no EQ.
Trading compassion, boy.
And then with the low cut.
Trading compassion, boy.
It's a little subtle. If you're listening for it, you can really hear the difference in the low end. So that's the verb on the growls, and then the delay on the growl is a much longer one.
Trading compassion, boy.
In fact, it's almost a full second. It's more aggressively high passed because there's more low end on the voice. It's actually fairly aggressively low pass too. It's kind of like it's sort of like a lo-fi delay sound. If you solo that.
Trading compassion, boy.
That's just because I like that. I'm a fan of some lo-fi stuff, and I think that sits well.
Trading compassion, boy.
In the mix. It just kind of gives it some gravitas. It's a slower section, so this is more like a Death Doom kind of section, right? It's a little slower. The big delay gives it some gravitas. The verb gives it like the sense of scale. And it just really makes it sound big and monstrous. And then same trick with the compressor, which kind of came in handy over here for this section where the riff picks up kind of a lot, and I didn't want a ton of delay getting in the way, but I found that the vocal line was just busy enough to keep the delay out of the way just on its own with this setup with the ducking. If that hadn't been the case, I probably would have sent this to a second track and sent that to a slightly different delay. But here is that part. So if you solo the vocals, you can really hear. And so if you turn off this compressor, it gets real messy. So vocal is unintelligible anyway, but having that kind of ducking on the effects really helps the vocal kind of stay where it needs to without getting unintelligible. But then when it ends, you kind of get that same sense of space. So that's the main stuff for that, and then let's go into the little nitty gritty for a hot second. It's a little hard to see. Hopefully it's big on the camera. I've got some automation going here, which I use for a couple things. I use it as kind of like a de-esser and a de-tier, so that sound. De-essers are weird. My experience has not been great with de-essers. I usually find that by the time I can set it up so it actually gets rid of the S's, it makes the vocal sound like the singer has a cold, because it's like taking out too much stuff. This is a trick I learned from a guy in the movie industry. So I don't know if I'm giving away secrets here, but basically you find your little trouble spots and you make automation points and just manually pull them down. So I didn't do too much of that in this track. There really weren't that many trouble spots, but my singer likes to write things with a lot of S's, so you do a lot of work with some people. Some lyrics, it's lyric dependent. If there are no S's in the whole song, your job's easy. But yeah, you just kind of... And if I go and take these points out real fast, you can kind of hear the difference. For that sound just hits much harder. So what that does, obviously makes it less annoying to listen to, but also helps deal with like ungainly peaks, because those transients, they don't really look like they're loud, but they can be actually super loud and really make your mix like peak out right there. And then that, when you're trying to set your level for like your export, it's like, oh, why am I clipping that? It's like your average might be like, -6 or something, but then you'll have these like peaks at 0. And then, when you're trying to like master it and compress it for loudness, that can kind of like run into problems. So fixing little things like this really helps you out in the long run. Vocal, snare, and acoustic guitars are kind of like the 3 things that I have found that can really fuck me up level-wise, because your vocals with your T's and your S's, at least you can listen for those pretty easily. The acoustic guitar can have some really funky transients that are really bright because it's just like the pick on the strings. And then snare drum, because drummers aren't consistent, sometimes they'll just like whack it and sometimes they'll just explode it, and it's super annoying. So there's that. And then the other thing I did with this part is this phrase here. You can see it visually, it's a little quieter, and then in the mix, the part that part it's in is a lot busier. So 2 things. Didn't want the delay in the way because there's a lot of stuff already going on there. So got rid of that, or the same thing I was already doing. That worked out well, so I didn't have to do anything else. The other thing was I just automated that part up a little bit, about half a dB. Really not a lot of extra gain. And I really could have pushed it a lot harder. That was just a matter of preference. I kind of like buried vocals because to me heavy metal isn't about the vocal, it's about everything, one part of which is the vocal. So when the vocal is like the main point of the mix in a metal song, most of the time I'm a little turned off because I still want to hear the cool riffs, I want to hear everything. I want it to be balanced. So I could probably put that a little louder without any problems, but I chose to keep it quiet. And you can agree or disagree, and that's fine. I'm just showing you kind of my thought process. So that's the growl part, and then the last part is the crazy like black metal screechy part. I wrote down the lyrics so I could remember what they were. That is, last children of earth under an empty sky. I can almost tell what I'm saying, and I said it. Anyway, so kind of going through this part, slightly different EQ just because it was a slightly different kind of vocal. I sort of did the same double compressor thing because there's some pretty funky peaks on this. Like you can just kind of see a couple visually. Nothing clipping, but because there's like some gnarly like mouth sounds, I thought it best to do a dual stage compressor and then kind of level off the big stuff and then comp it for real. So just real fast. If I turn off the effects, we get no effects, and then comp and EQ. Yeah, it sounds just a little cleaner, like not intelligible, but more like on purpose, I guess. Yeah, these are all small moves I did. Like if you kind of take them off one at a time. Didn't do a whole lot there. The reverb and delay are a little different. This was like a goofy preset. And it's like a real lo-fi sound. Like it's just, you can see the high pass and the low pass are like set to the same spot. So like it's like a real telephony thing. So the ping pong stereo, it's kind of a goofy time. Like literally this is just a preset called bandpass delay, and I thought it sounded cool, so I didn't mess with it. Same deal with the delay ducking. Always do that unless you just really want a lot of delay. And the reverb, instead of the hybrid delay, the H delay, I used the plate delay. And I used a distorted preset and then took the distortion off because I didn't like it, but I like the rest of it. You can hear the plate delay is a lot brighter and a little less natural sounding. It sounds more like a plate delay than a big empty room. Because it's a plate delay. Imagine that. Or, excuse me, a plate reverb. I keep saying delay. I thought aesthetically that sound, that slightly more artificial sound, fit that vocal line better. It's brighter. It cuts a little harder. It sounds a little weirder. It sounds a little less natural. I've got the bass cut set to its most aggressive setting here in the plugin, but I found that, yeah, I liked to aggressively high pass it, and I did it like 300, so there's a lot less low end in it, so it's all kind of trebly, so it's just, you know, it's getting completely out of the way of the low end instruments because the bass is doing some crazy shit, but the kick drum's going nuts, so you don't want any extra low end around there because the kick drum's just going a fucking mile a minute. So if you take that off, you can hear it's like this big nasty buildup, so that cleans that up right away, and it just helps it sound super aggro. And then we have the delay in there too, and it's just like some crazed dude shouting in a gym bathroom or something, and it sits well in the mix, I think. And, you know, it's kind of underneath the bass because the bass is doing this cool arpeggio thing. And yeah, so that's that. And then the very last part, it's back on that first track, so all the effects things I talked about there, you can see it's real loud. So the only real interesting thing I did here was, if you listen, I went and automated the delay out, so when it ends it goes, the reverb trail's still there, but there's no delay trail. If I take away, Jesus Christ, let's see what I was talking about. So if I take away the automation on the delay, if I take away that point, which I can't do, there we go. You just get that big echoey end versus, come back, if you, the way I did end it. That was just an aesthetic choice. I thought it was a stronger ending to end with the reverb trail only versus having the, you know, big ping pong echo going on. I generally feel that way, not in every single instance. An aesthetic preference, mine is to typically end with the reverb sans delay. And just sort of general notes, as you can see, I like a lot of ambience, but I like controlled ambience. I don't like it when it's super dry because I feel like, I don't know, it feels less immersive. It feels less theatrical in a way. So that's just the choices I made. I hope this was an interesting video and not just long and boring. It's kind of a how-to, but it's also a why I did. And hopefully, by showing you some mistakes I made, some more on purpose than others, and how I had to deal with those, that can show you something useful. And thank you for watching. It's going to be back to the chair. Well, cool. I hope you guys enjoyed that and learned something. It wasn't too horribly weird and disorganized. It probably was. I'll find out like in 2 hours when I finish editing it, so you guys will know before me. It's not actually true, but kind of true. If anyone has any questions or like a request for a topic or something, go ahead and write a comment. I don't get very many at this point, so I'll read them. They're not going to slip by me. I get like 3 ever. I think the next video I'm going to do, maybe even the next couple of videos, are going to be more photography things, because I've just got like a couple things I did, but music stuff is coming too. Working on the new record again, which is nice. My band's record is hopefully going to be finished real soon. Everything is recorded. We're just kind of waiting on the mixing dude to do his mixing stuff. We'll see how that goes. So, yeah. Yeet.